Hey guys, Brox here, doing the feedback video now. We just finished up the build guide video and got that published on YouTube. So now I wanted to talk about just my generalized feedback of Slormancer, and this is going to be a preferably short video because I think this game is phenomenal. I've heard that it's a two-person dev team with only one programmer who actually does the coding, and if that's true in any form, where only one guy coded this whole game, GGG, EHG, and especially Blizzard should just be ashamed of themselves because what this one person has created to me is the best ARPG I've ever played. Better than Path of Exile, better than Path of Exile 2. I know that's going to be blasphemy to some people to hear, but I find Path of Exile's campaign to be excruciatingly bad, and I have no desire to ever play Path of Exile 1 again because of the campaign. And Path of Exile 2 is too much like Dark Souls for me to be fun and exciting. I was a much bigger fan of Diablo 3 as a ARPG, and I know that doesn't make any sense to a lot of people because Diablo 3 is generally very terrible, and I agree. But I always saw the potential in what Diablo 3 could be if they had removed set items and just had it where you would go around and find legendary equipment and then combine the different functionalities of the legendaries to create interesting and unique builds, and then add on top of that, different ways to utilize skills and their outputs. And what is funny is that is essentially this game. So this game to me is what Diablo 3 should have always been. Remove set items and have a bunch of different legendaries that kind of play off each other, and you can kind of use their effects to chain combinations together to create interesting and diverse builds. And that to me it has created one of the best ARPGs. The campaign's not that bad. There's ways to supplement out to speed it up and level yourself up quickly. And then on top of that, there's just this robust end game of different things you have to do. There's like 20 different bosses that you have to clear, and then there's a peak pinnacle boss, and then I've heard there's even like a level even beyond this where there's primordial versions of all of this. It's just remarkable. I think not only is this one of the best ARPGs I've ever played, I actually think this is probably one of the best games I've ever played. And if this was coded by one singular person, all of this depth, all of this detail, the end game versus teams of hundreds of people, and in Blizzard's case supposedly 9,000 people, it just remarkably blows my mind that we couldn't get this in a AAA format at some point prior to this moment. Truly, indies are redefining the gaming space. Every single indie game that comes out is just showing the world what should exist. You can feel the passion everywhere in this game, and for $15, I think the guy is drastically underselling this game. This game should, without question, be $35 minimum. He could charge full price, and this game would still be worth its value in ridiculous amounts. There's so much build diversity, there's so many things to do, but it's not perfect. But my gripes with it not being perfect are very minimal and very easily fixed. If the developer wanted to take just a moment to fix these things, the game would be near perfection to me, if not perfect, like the perfect ARPG. Number one, for a game that has so much quality of life, I mean so much quality of life in it, for new player friendly, build diversity friendly, respecking friendly, and all that stuff, one of the weirdest misses for quality of life is that the main, like, where you're going to spend most of your time is this guy right here to run all of your different areas and locations. So running the Netherworld, running the Forge, Slorm, Battlefield. So if this is going to be the central hub of the game, I want all my vendors to be in this area. I want to be able to run in the littlest distance away from this guy possible to access all of my vendors. So like, for instance, this should be the hammersmith or the weaponsmith guy. This should be the mage. This should be like the quarry guy. This girl over here should be the vendor for selling. And then like maybe my stashes, instead of this light post, my stash boxes are here. So my chest and my legendary chest are right here, so that when I finish a run, I can quickly just drop off loot and go right back into another run, or run over, craft on a piece of gear real quick, go right back into another run. If I finish Slorm Temple, I can come down here really fast, hit the wizard guy, and then go back and do another run. The biggest crap I have is I have to run all over, like I finish a run and I have to come here to sell off any pieces so that I can get the crafting materials. I may stop here if I need to drop off any legendaries. Then I gotta run down here and I gotta go over here to Rick, and for Rick I have to upgrade all my gear pieces, so I have to come in here and I have to go like this, right? And then I gotta put all this in, and all my pieces of gear need to be updated. Then I do that, I've got to run all the way over here to the wizard so that I can spend my slorm. So like I got 56 slorm, so I can upgrade this. Then I gotta run all the way back. Let's say I have like a legendary that I want to sell. I have to come here, I have to, go here and be like, okay, this one's worth 36,000, it's useless to me, so I can sell it for that 36,000. Then I gotta come to Corey, I gotta go to Corey, and then I gotta, update this, if I have anything that I need to upgrade, so like maybe I have stuff for my rune or for my weapon to increase. Then I gotta go back up the stairs, and I gotta come all the way back to this guy just to do another run. All this, like this guy is useless, this guy is useless, you're probably never going to use either one of these guys. They could be replaced with the weaponsmith, the wizard, Corey, the vendor, and like maybe the stash is here, and then maybe Frederick, the upgrade guy, can be here by the fountain, just so everything is in this centralized area and you don't have to leave the area to which you can just get right back into doing more runs and being more efficient. So that's probably my biggest gripe from like a time loss standpoint playing the game, is just running around this town just to, once you complete a run, could easily be fixed by just better placement of all the vendors. This is a rookie mistake. It happens a lot in a lot of games. Path of Exile solved this by just letting you place vendors where you want them to be, place where your map wants to be in your hideout, place the vendors around your map so you can quickly go in and out of runs and be efficient. I get that obviously that level of depth, it doesn't need to exist here, but it would just be nice if all the vendors were here centralized around the actual point in which you're running maps. The other gripe I have is a significant one, actually, and I think this needs to just be changed as soon as possible. And I hope the dev listens to this, because I think this is the most negative thing in the entire game, and that is this belt. Aura's Unbreakable Barrier, which is whenever dealt damage, the damage cannot exceed a certain amount of damage, and that damage is calced by your max life. This belt is obscenely broken, and it's not only the fact that it exists that is a problem, it's the fact that it undermines the entire point of the ARPG to significant degrees. And what I mean by that is, since it's a flat number, it bypasses all mitigation and negation, and it just says, hey, you're going to take this damage regardless of what happens. So you don't need armor, you don't need Ellie res, so if you look at my armor and my Ellie res over here, you don't need either one of those stats. You don't need any elemental resistances independent outside of shadow resistance for the debuff negation. And you specifically do not want any HP. You want your HP to be as low as humanly possible, because it's factoring this percentage off of your max HP and shield. You want no shield, and you want your HP to be as low as humanly possible, because if you pair it with Sorrow's boots, then you take this number and you divide by 10, so in this case it would be 234 damage per tick, and then all you have to do is solve for life regeneration over 234. So if we look at this piece of gear, right, this chest piece, so if I go down here and I upgrade it at Frederick real quick, because I just made this piece of gear, so we don't have a chance here. Okay, we doubled, so maybe this will be easier to explain. So up 138. So if we go back and we look at this piece of gear, we have 138 regen, and then if we look at my life regen, I'm at 159. So I can't completely negate it just yet, but as soon as this is like a +8 on it, we're essentially going to be immortal, because we will life regen more than the damage ticks that is hitting us. So as we take 234 damage, we're going to heal back more than 234 damage. We can't die, and we don't need any defensive layers at all. We don't even need evasion. We're stacking it just for the benefit of not even taking the hit to have to deal with it. But the belt itself just negates any reason to have HP, negates any reason to have armor, Ellie res, independent reses. This belt is way too strong. And the other part that a lot of people don't understand is, once you get this belt and these boots, and you can just put enough life regen to make yourself immortal, you essentially devalue the entire game. like the whole game, because you can put this piece of gear, the two pieces of gear here and life regen on any character. So if I went to the Huntress and I switched to the Huntress, I can put on the same piece of gear and I'm immortal on the Huntress. I can play any build, literally any build. I can't die, and it just means that all I have to solve for is damage. I don't have to solve for defense. I can play any build and be immortal. I can go play the warrior, same thing. I can play any build. All I have to solve for is damage, and that means every stat on my piece of gear doesn't, like, defense doesn't matter, and I don't have to solve for it. I only have to solve for making enough damage to do enough damage to enemies to kill them at the higher levels. When you don't have to solve for defense, when you get to nether pieces of gear, you can use the defensive stat allocation just for more offense, because you literally don't need defense in any respect outside of shadow resistance. So you can actually take the defensive stats and just turn them into pure offensive stats and beat the game on any build, any character, anything. And I think not having to solve for defenses is like part of the, like, half the part of ARPGs, right? Like, what's the point of having wrath increase levels? So like when we increase this to like plus 100, as you can see, we're getting damage multipliers. Increased damage multiplier is 10,000, 11,000, 12,000. None of that matters. Like, that entire line for 13,000 increased damage multiplier is completely and utterly negated by this belt, because you'll never take more than 2,406. All you're solving for at that point is the life increase modifier. So if these enemies have 180,000% life, do you do enough damage to kill them quickly? So like, for instance, if I'll do an example. If I go plus 100, now I don't have 100% shadow res yet, so there's the potential I die to shadow res here. But if I go all the way up to plus 100 and I start, we do a random, all I have to do is just solve for the damage, right? So there's 639 million, but it doesn't matter if I take damage, because you see I'm healing it back instantly. This is with no armor, no Ellie res, no res outside of a little bit of shadow res, because I don't have 100% shadow res yet. And I'm doing Wrath 100 with no defenses. And there's no risk of me dying in here either. I just have to do, you know, enough damage to kill everything in here, and as you can see, we definitely do enough damage on this build. And this goes for anything. If I go on a Huntress, if I go on the Knight, nothing really matters here unless I get tagged by Shadow Confusion, which is the Shadow debuff. But if I had 100% Shadow res, not even that debuff would stop this. So essentially, the build allows me to beat the game with no thought process whatsoever. And the simple way to fix this is the belt needs to be removed. I would also remove Shadow or Sorrow's Pact, the boots. I would also just completely remove that from the game. I don't think that also needs to exist. I think it's too strong of boots. I think you should have to solve for defense. I think you should have to have defensive affixes on your gear. I think those should matter and they should be important. Additionally, I think to help with that a little bit is maybe we add an extra defensive slot in the defense normal area, where we only, in the, like, for instance, when you get the base normal stats on gear, actually just show you what I mean. So like here, the base stats have 2, but the defensive stat only has 1. I think if the base stats and the defensive stat had 2, then it would allow for people to be able to add resistances. So each piece of gear, you could add some fire resistance, you could add some, you know, poison resistance, whatever resistances there are. Let's see. It's so non-factor that I don't even know what resistances exist. Like, for instance, you could use some gear to add ice resistance, lightning resistance, light resistance. Like, this stuff should matter, but currently none of this matters. Like, there's no effect that any of this plays in the game. And I feel like because you're going to need, like, for instance, if the belt didn't exist and the boots didn't exist, you're going to need one defensive stat layer to add armor and to add elemental resistances, to the point where if you don't have an extra defensive stat layer, the magic and rare stats are going to have to be allocated to elemental resist and elemental resist percent, and armor resist percent. And that right there is already 4 different allocations on each piece of gear, which starts making the game struggle a little bit for damage, because then you have to use epic stat ranges to fill in the damage differentials. So if defense, you don't have room to add like shadow resist and fire resist, because then you're only going to be left with one allocation spot between magic, rare, and epic stats to add more damage to the build. So I think if defensive stats had one more, just like the base stats, that you could add, so you could actually play on all these different pieces of gear working on your different independent resistances, I think that would be supremely valuable. I also think armor and evasion and elemental resistance should have a cap of 75%. Same with the independent resistances, should all have a cap of 75%, so that you can never fully cap out on evasion and you can never fully negate 100% of damage. You have to solve for each of them. That also will make projectile damage reduction, area damage reduction, and elite damage reduction actually matter as stats. Currently, again, the belt makes sure that none of those stats matter. Like, I can just stand here, nothing's gonna happen to me inside of this room. So yeah, I think my biggest point of feedback is this specific belt and these specific boots just need to be deleted from the game. I'm fine with something like Immortal's Grasp existing, which covers the spread for 7 seconds and gives you a huge amount of life regen for 7 seconds. I think that is fine, as long as your independent ranges for defenses has caps. So again, you have an armor cap, evasion cap, elemental resistance cap, and you still have to solve for getting enough negation to bring that damage threshold when you go into like Wrath 100 down. But I think Ara's Unbreakable Barrier and Sorrow's Pact both need to be removed from the game. I think they're way too impactful on defensive layers of the game. For instance, this guy can hit me and he does no damage to me. This is Wrath 100. Look, he's hitting me. I'm taking no damage. Heal, 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 heal. Heal, heal, heal. I don't take any damage from Wrath 100. And I think that's a huge problem. So if there's anything I would tell the developer, please, give a consideration to removing those 2 pieces of gear so that the game becomes more interesting, build diversity becomes more interesting, build crafting becomes more interesting, and having to solve for defenses becomes more interesting. Because currently right now, these 2 pieces of item makes build crafting completely irrelevant. I can literally play the worst build in the entire game and know that I can't die, and I just have to figure out how to get damage on the build, which I don't think is it should be more interesting than that. So if the dev sees this, please, 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 please consider just removing this belt. You don't even have to change it, nerf it, none of that. Just remove it. Just straight up remove the legendary effect on both this boot and this belt. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to solve for it. It's not necessary. Just completely remove those 2, and you don't even have to replace it with anything. Just get rid of those 2 things, and the game becomes infinitely more interesting from a build crafting standpoint, because there's just more to solve. These 2 pieces of gear are just way, way, way too strong, and just take the fun out of the game, because I know now that anything I do is gonna work, and that's not fun. So that's what I have for feedback. I really hope they take this to heart, because I think this game could be even better than it is right now if these 2 pieces of gear didn't exist. All right, guys, have a good one.